Aber, immer ba.
I'm 30 years old, and this is my story. Ava, when you're a kid, you see your parents as these giants. Unshakable. The center of your universe. Mine certainly were. My mom, Eleanor, was this force of nature. Always buzzing, always organizing, the glue that held everything together. And my dad, Robert, he was the quiet strength, the rock. A man of few words, but when he spoke, you listened. He was a carpenter, his hands always smelling faintly of sawdust and varnish, calloused and strong, capable of building anything. Our house, the one I grew up in, was practically built by his own two hands, piece by piece, board by board. It felt like a monument to his dedication. I was the middle child, sandwiched between my older brother, Mark, who always had a rebellious streak, and my younger sister, Chloe, the quintessential baby of the family, charming everyone with her innocent smiles. I was the peacemaker, I guess. The responsible one. The one who usually saw both sides, tried to mediate arguments, and felt the weight of everyone's happiness on my shoulders a little too much. It was never explicitly said, but it was just my role. If something needed doing, if someone needed help, I was usually the first to step up. It felt natural, a part of who I was. And for a long time, I didn't question it. It was simply how our family operated. Our weekends were spent at Grandma's house. Sunday dinners were mandatory, and family vacations to the Jersey Shore were annual pilgrimage rituals. We were, by all accounts, a tight-knit American family. The kind you see in old photos, smiling perfectly. Our life wasn't lavish, but it was comfortable. Dad worked hard. Mom managed the household budget with the precision of a skilled accountant, and we kids had everything we needed. We had values instilled in us. Hard work, loyalty, family above all else. That last one? Family above all else. That phrase echoed in my mind for years, a mantra, a guiding principle that shaped my decisions, especially the big ones. It made me who I was, fundamentally. It was the bedrock. Ava. Then, about 5 years ago, the cracks started to show in that rock. Dad started looking tired. More than just tired from a long day at the workshop. His skin took on a yellowish tinge, his eyes seemed sunken, and he was always thirsty. At first, we brushed it off. Just getting older, Dad, Mark would joke, or you're working too hard, Robert, Mom would say, trying to coax him into taking a day off.
But it progressed.
He lost weight rapidly. His usually steady hands began to tremble. His characteristic quiet strength turned into a quiet weariness that was heartbreaking to witness. He became distant, withdrawn, as if a part of his vibrant energy was slowly being siphoned away. The doctor visits started, a slow trickle at first, then a flood. Blood tests, urine tests, biopsies. The waiting rooms became a second home. The hushed conversations with doctors, the grim faces, the medical jargon that felt like a foreign language designed to confuse and terrify. Then came the diagnosis: advanced kidney failure. Both kidneys. End-stage renal disease. It hit us like a freight train. My strong, silent dad, who could build anything, was slowly wasting away because his body couldn't filter its own blood anymore. The news shattered our family's perfectly constructed world. My mom, usually so composed, would just stare out the window for hours, tears streaming silently down her face. Mark, who always kept a tough exterior, became withdrawn, snapping at anyone who tried to comfort him. Chloe, still young, didn't fully grasp the gravity, but she felt the shift, the palpable fear that permeated our home. And me? I went into overdrive. Researching, calling, scheduling, trying to understand everything I could about dialysis, transplants, prognosis. It was my default mechanism. If I could understand it, I could control it, I could fix it. The idea that something so fundamental could be broken, could break him, was terrifying. Dad started dialysis, 3 times a week, hours hooked up to a machine that hummed and whirred, keeping him alive, but barely. He'd come home utterly exhausted, his spirit dimmed. He couldn't work anymore. His workshop, once vibrant with the scent of wood and the whine of saws, grew silent, gathering dust. It was agonizing to watch him, This man, who was the embodiment of strength, becomes so fragile, so dependent. The laughter in our home was replaced by a heavy silence, punctuated only by the beeps of medical equipment or the hushed consultations with nurses and specialists. Ava, the doctors made it clear, dialysis was a stopgap. What he truly needed was a kidney transplant. The waiting list, though, stretched for years. Years he didn't have. His health was deteriorating rapidly. The conversations became more urgent, more desperate. We needed a living donor. The call went out informally at first, then more explicitly. My parents were discreet, not wanting to put pressure on anyone, but the implication was clear. Who among us, his children, would step up? Mark was tested first. He had a family of his own, young kids, a burgeoning career. He went through the initial screenings. We waited, hopeful. Then came the news. Mark wasn't a match. Or, rather, the doctors had concerns about some underlying health issues that made him an unsuitable donor. It was a blow, a collective sigh of disappointment that hung heavy in the air. He was visibly relieved, though, which I remember noticing even then. He looked at Mom and Dad with a genuine apology in his eyes, but also a hint of something else, a release. Chloe, the youngest, was still in college. She was barely out of her teens, just starting her own life. The doctors said she was too young, too small, her body still developing. While she wanted to, her eligibility was immediately ruled out. A small part of me wondered if they would have even let her, given the risks. That left me. I remember standing in the kitchen, the sunlight streaming in, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air, the silence deafening. Mom was at the counter, stirring coffee she wouldn't drink. Dad was slumped in his armchair in the living room, a thin blanket over his legs, staring blankly at the TV. The air was thick with unspoken questions, with desperate hope, with fear. I looked at my dad, saw the way his chest barely rose and fell, saw the shadow that had fallen over his once vibrant eyes. And something inside me just solidified. I walked over to my mom. "I'll do it," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'll get tested." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide, glistening with tears. "Ava, no," she whispered, her voice cracking. That's too much to ask." "You didn't ask," I replied, meeting her gaze. "I'm offering." And I meant it. Truly. I loved my dad. He was a good man. He deserved to live. And if I had the power to give him that life, how could I not? The family above all else mantra rang in my ears. This was it. This was the ultimate expression of that belief. This was the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate proof of love. The fear was there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by a fierce determination, a sense of purpose that felt bigger than myself. The testing process was grueling. Weeks of blood work, tissue typing, psychological evaluations, scans, endless consultations. They wanted to make sure I was not only a physical match but also mentally prepared for the magnitude of what I was about to do. They asked me, again and again, if I felt pressured, if I truly understood the risks, the pain, the recovery, the fact that I would be living with only one kidney for the rest of my life. Each time, I answered honestly. No, I wasn't pressured. Yes, I understood. Yes, I was ready. My parents, especially my mom, tried to talk me out of it, or at least they said they did. "Are you absolutely sure, honey?" she'd ask, her eyes pleading. "It's a huge decision." But underneath their words, I could feel the immense relief, the silent, desperate hope. And Dad, he just squeezed my hand, a silent tear rolling down his cheek. He couldn't speak much then, but that single tear spoke volumes. It reinforced my conviction. I was doing the right thing. I was saving my dad. Ava. The surgery day arrived, crisp and cold, a bright winter morning. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear. I remember the white walls, the hushed voices, the cold efficiency of the nurses preparing me. They shaved a patch of my stomach, inserted in 4. My heart was pounding, a drum in my chest. Fear was a living thing, squirming inside me. What if something went wrong? What if I didn't wake up? What if it didn't work for Dad? But then I thought of him, frail in his hospital bed just down the hall, and the fear receded, replaced by that stubborn determination. My parents were there, their faces etched with worry. My mom hugged me tight, holding on as if she could absorb some of my pain, some of my fear. My dad just looked at me, a profound gratitude in his eyes. Mark and Chloe were there too, looking uncomfortable, but supportive in their own ways. I remember telling them, "I'll be okay. Dad, we'll be okay." It was as much for me as it was for them. Then came the anesthesia, the count backwards, the world fading to black. I woke up in a haze of pain, a dull, throbbing ache in my side, like I'd been run over by a truck. My abdomen was bandaged tightly, a constant pressure. Every movement was excruciating. Coughing? Forget about it. Laughing?
Absolutely not.
The first few days were a blur of pain medication, beeping machines, and the constant presence of nurses checking my vitals. I was weak, exhausted, and strangely, profoundly empty, as if a part of me had literally been scooped out.
Which, of course, it had.
But then, the good news started trickling in. Dad's surgery had been a success. The kidney was working. His body was accepting it. I remember the first time I saw him after the surgery, wheeled into my room, looking pale but brighter, less yellow. He managed a weak smile, and for the first time in months, his eyes held a spark of life. He reached for my hand, his grip stronger than it had been in ages. And in that moment, all the pain, all the fear, all the sacrifice felt worth it. It truly did. It was the best feeling in the world, seeing him like that, knowing I had done this. I had given him life. My recovery was slow. I was out of the hospital in a week, but the real healing happened at home. I couldn't lift anything heavy, couldn't twist, couldn't really laugh without a sharp jolt of pain. Mom was amazing during that time, doting on me, bringing me meals, making sure I took my pain meds. Dad was recovering too, getting stronger every day, slowly getting his color back, his energy returning. He spent a lot of time just sitting beside me, talking quietly, expressing his gratitude. "You saved my life, Ava," he'd say, his voice thick with emotion. "I can never repay you." And I'd just smile, tell him, "You don't have to, Dad. Just live." It felt good. It felt right. I was the hero of our family. I had given my father a second chance. Ava. But then slowly, imperceptibly at first, things began to shift. The immediate rush of gratitude, the intense focus on my recovery, started to wane. My parents were relieved, yes, profoundly so, but that relief seemed to morph into a kind of expectation. Like I had simply fulfilled my duty, and now it was time for things to return to normal. Except, my normal had changed. I was still recovering, still had limits, still felt the phantom ache of a missing organ. But to them, Dad was better, so everything should be better. The doting stopped. The special meals became less frequent. My pain, which was still very real, became less of a topic of conversation. If I complained, it was met with a sympathetic nod, but then the conversation would invariably turn to Dad's latest progress, or their upcoming plans now that he was healthier. It wasn't malicious, not exactly. It was more like they just forgot. Or perhaps they consciously or unconsciously chose to forget the magnitude of what I had done, because to remember it would mean acknowledging a debt too vast to repay. My brother, Mark, who had been so relieved not to be a match, never really thanked me. He'd say, "Glad Dad's better," but never acknowledged how he was better. Chloe was still caught up in her college life, sending occasional texts, but mostly oblivious to the nuances of the emotional shift happening at home. I started to feel invisible, like the act of donation had been a grand gesture, appreciated for a moment, and then swiftly filed away. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was the donor, and that role, once lauded, now felt like a burden, a thing they wanted to move past. The real turning point, the beginning of the end, came about a year and a half after the transplant. Dad was fully recovered, back to light work, enjoying life again. He was vibrant, more so than he had been in years. And that made their subsequent actions all the more baffling and all the more hurtful. I had always been the dependable one, remember? The one who solved problems, who stepped up. And after the donation, they seemed to internalize this even more deeply. They felt I owed them, not just for raising me, but as if the kidney had somehow deepened my obligation, made me irrevocably tied to their needs. My parents owned a small piece of land, a few acres outside of town, that had been in the family for generations. It wasn't worth much, but it was sentimental. They had always talked about building a small cabin on it someday, a retirement dream. Well, now that Dad was healthy, they decided it was time. But they needed help. Financial help, mostly, to get things started. They came to me, asking for a significant loan. Not a small sum, but a substantial chunk of my savings. Savings I had been painstakingly building for my own future, a down payment on a house, maybe. I hesitated. I loved them, of course. But I had just sacrificed a part of my body for Dad. My body was still healing, still adjusting. My career was demanding, and I was trying to build my own life. I had plans. This wasn't just a small request. It was a serious financial commitment, one that would set me back years. And it felt like another demand, another expectation. I tried to explain, gently. Mom, Dad, I really want to help, but that's a lot. And I'm trying to save for my own place. Maybe we can look at other options? A smaller loan from the bank? Or maybe phase the building out. My mom's face hardened. Other options? Ava, this is family. This is your father's dream. After everything, you're going to nickel and dime us now. Her voice was laced with an accusation that stung. Dad, who usually stayed out of financial discussions, chimed in. We thought we could count on you, honey. Family helps family. He looked disappointed, his voice carrying that quiet weight of disapproval that always got to me. I tried again. I am helping. I saved Dad's life. And I'm still feeling the effects of that surgery physically, financially. I had a lot of time off work. I didn't want to bring it up, but their dismissiveness pushed me. I needed them to see me, not just their donor. My mom scoffed. Oh, that again. We know what you did, Ava. We're grateful. But that was then, this is now. We're talking about a loan, not a handout. We'll pay you back, of course. But your family, you have an obligation. An obligation. The word hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. An obligation beyond giving a part of my body? Beyond the pain, the recovery, the lifelong risk? It felt like they were saying, you gave us a kidney, so now you owe us everything else. The initial gratitude had curdled into entitlement. I felt a cold anger start to simmer within me. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about respect, about boundaries, about them seeing me as a person, not just a resource. I can't, I said, my voice firmer than I intended. Not right now. Not this much. And that's when it truly exploded. Ava. The scene is seared into my memory. It was in their living room, the very same room where Dad had sat so frail, where I had made the decision to save him. The air was thick, charged with unspoken resentment that had been festering for months. Mom's face was blotchy, red with anger, her lips pressed into a thin, furious line. Dad, usually so stoic, had a vein throbbing in his temple. Mark and Chloe weren't there, thank goodness, but their absence made me feel even more isolated, more exposed. You can't, Mom screeched, her voice rising in pitch. You can't? After everything we've done for you? After we raised you, put a roof over your head, food on your table? This is how you repay us. Repay you? I cried, tears starting to blur my vision, the injustice of it all hitting me with full force. I gave Dad a kidney. What more do you want from me? Dad pushed himself up from his armchair, his face contorted. That was your choice, Ava. We never asked you to do that. You made your decision and we thanked you for it. But this is different. This is about loyalty. About family. It is about loyalty. I shot back, my voice shaking with rage and pain. And where's yours? Where's the loyalty to me? To my own needs, my own future? You just expect me to keep giving, keep sacrificing, without ever asking what I need in return. My mom stepped closer, her finger pointing at me, trembling. Her words were laced with venom, dripping with years of unspoken resentments that suddenly found their outlet. You're selfish, Ava. Always have been, deep down. You think you're so special because you did one good thing? You think that gives you a pass to abandon your family when they need you. Abandon you? I could barely believe what I was hearing. This was beyond the loan. This was an excavation of every perceived slight, every hidden disappointment they had ever felt about me. My role as the responsible daughter, the peacemaker, the fixer, had suddenly flipped, and I was now the villain. Then my dad, his face purple, his voice booming in a way I hadn't heard since I was a child getting yelled at for breaking a vase, delivered the final blow. The words that sliced through me, colder and sharper than any surgeon's scalpel. If this is how you're going to be, Ava, he roared, his eyes blazing, if you're going to turn your back on us now, then you're not our daughter anymore. We don't want anything to do with you. The words hung in the air, echoing in the sudden, shocking silence. You're not our daughter anymore. My breath caught in my throat. My vision swam. It was like being struck by lightning, the very foundation of my identity crumbling beneath me. My parents, the giants, the unshakable center,
Had just disowned me.
for setting a boundary, for saying no, for daring to have a life separate from their demands. After I had given them everything, a cold, hard fury replaced the pain. A rage, so intense it burned away the tears. The years of trying to be perfect, of striving for their approval, of placing their needs above my own, it all culminated in that single, devastating sentence. And it brought with it a clarity I had never known. My voice, when it came, was low, steady, and dangerously calm. It was a voice I didn't even recognize as my own. Fine, I said, my eyes fixed on my father's, then give back the kidney I donated to Dad. Ava. The silence that followed was deafening. My mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Dad froze, his face draining of color, his jaw slacking. The shock on their faces was palpable. They hadn't expected that. They had expected tears, begging, capitulation. They had expected their dutiful daughter to crumble. But I didn't. Not this time. In that moment, the raw, unfiltered truth of my sacrifice, juxtaposed with their casual dismissal, had finally erupted. It wasn't a real demand, of course. It was a visceral scream of pain, of betrayal, of the ultimate injustice. It was the only way I knew how to make them truly see, truly feel, the weight of what I had given and what they had just thrown away. It was my heart, torn out and presented to them, demanding they acknowledge its price. I didn't wait for a response. I couldn't. I just turned, walked out of that living room, out of that house that Dad built with his strong, sawdust-smelling hands, and out of their lives. The door closed behind me with a soft thud that sounded like a final gavel. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember how I got there. All I could feel was the searing pain of their words, the phantom ache in my side, and an overwhelming sense of emptiness. My family above all else, mantra shattered into a million pieces. What was family, if this was what it meant? If love was conditional, tied to endless obligation, even after giving a part of myself? The weeks and months that followed were incredibly difficult. I cut off contact. They tried to call at first, a few angry messages from Mom, a couple of terse texts from Mark telling me to just apologize and fix it. Chloe was caught in the middle, confused, hurt, occasionally reaching out with hesitant, tearful messages. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed space. I needed to heal from this deeper wound, a wound that went beyond the physical scars. I questioned everything. Was I wrong? Was I truly selfish? Did I make too much of the kidney? But then I would remember the look on Dad's face when he was sick, the gratitude, the promise of life. And I would remember Mom's entitlement, Dad's cruel words.
No.
I wasn't wrong to set a boundary. I wasn't wrong to say no. My body, my life, my future, they were mine, not theirs to continuously demand from. It's been over 3 years since that day. The silence from them is mostly complete now. Mark and Chloe rarely speak to me, caught in the loyalty bind of our parents. It's a profound grief, losing your family, even when they're the ones who pushed you away. It's like a limb has been amputated, and the phantom pains still hit me, especially on holidays, or when I see other families together. But through this immense pain, I've also found a strength I never knew I possessed. I've learned that self-worth isn't measured by how much you sacrifice for others, but by how much you value yourself. I learned that true family isn't just blood, it's chosen. It's the people who celebrate your wins, mourn your losses, and respect your boundaries without question. My friends have stepped up, becoming my chosen family, offering a kind of unconditional love and support I never truly felt from my own blood relatives. I don't regret donating my kidney to my dad. Not for a second. He deserved to live. And if I had to go back, knowing everything I know now, I would probably still do it. Because it came from a place of genuine love and compassion, and that's who I am. But what I do regret is not setting boundaries sooner. Not understanding that love, even familial love, needs healthy limits. And that sometimes, the greatest act of self-love is walking away from those who continuously diminish your worth, even if they are your own parents. My life now is different. It's quieter, perhaps a little lonelier in some ways, but it's also filled with a new kind of freedom. Freedom from expectation, from the crushing weight of pleasing everyone else. I'm building my own future, on my own terms. I'm figuring out what Ava wants, without the constant noise of what family demands. And that, in itself, is a profound and ongoing journey. Ava. So, that's my story. It's not neat, it's not tied up with a bow, and it doesn't have a perfectly happy ending where everyone reconciles. It's real. It's messy.
And it's mine.
If you connected with any part of my story, or if you've faced similar challenges with family, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. It helps to know we're not alone. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, or just support the journey, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with anyone who might need to hear it. It really means a lot. Ava. Thank you for listening.